Hi, my name is Rosalyn Eves. I'm going to be moderating this panel, but I want to make sure the panelists do most of the talking. So I'm going to let the panelists go ahead and introduce themselves, and then we'll throw out the first question.
What do we got alphabetically by first name? So CH?
That's a new one. All right. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I am Cindy Hung. I go by Cindy, and I write under CH Hung. I've also worked as an editor before in both a corporate environment and a freelance situation. So I've sort of done a lot of different stuff. And I'm a discovery writer, so my editing and rewriting process is pretty freaking chaotic. So happy to be here.
I guess that is me. So I'm David Afsharirad. I am a writer and editor. I guess my title is consulting editor. I don't know. We kind of made it up at Bain Books. And so I do a lot of, in my day job for them, I do a lot of copywriting, cover copy. I did a presentation on that actually here, which is cool. And that sort of thing. As a editor, I did 6 anthologies, and for Bain. And then as a writer, I've done mostly short stories, and have really kind of experimented. I would prefer that my first draft just be perfect, but that doesn't ever happen. So I've kind of tried a lot of different things with the rewriting and the editing and everything. So hopefully, I don't know that I found anything that works perfectly, but maybe have some different perspectives on things you can try, I hope.
And I'm Julie Wright. I am the managing editor at Sunwire, and I'm also their copywriter. It was a promotion I didn't ask for, but got anyway. Hooray! Well, promotion, that's extra work is what that handed up. Anyway, that's a whole story. But I take care of all of their magazine needs and their websites, and everything that needs to be edited comes through my desk. I also am a writer. I have written 25 novels, and I have 15 traditionally published. My 16th comes out in 2 weeks. Super excited. It is. I was even prepared. It's Captain for Caroline Gray. I'm super excited about that. I write science fiction, fantasy, and romance, and that's me.
Wow. I'm much more boring. I'm Nic Nelson. I'm with Wordsmith Writing Coaches. I'm the founder and head coach of Wordsmith Writing Coaches. So we're a small shop in Los Angeles, and we've been around for about 17 years, and we edit and help people bring their work to market. Our slogan is "Tell your story well and publish wisely." And we do everything from children's books to genre fiction and nonfiction and academic adaptations of dissertations for trade publication. We do all sorts of stuff.
Cool. And my name is Scott Parkin. I'm a author, editor, and whatnot else. I've published about 50 short stories. I've been a Writers of the Future winner. I've also been a Bain Fantasy Adventure Award finalist. Of which I'm very proud, by the way. And I publish across the thing. I also was across the markets, from mainstream to romance to military science fiction. And I've also done something that I forgot what it was, and I'll tell you about when I remember it. I was a technical writer for 30 years. So I've been on all sides of the writing, marketing, copywriting, technical writing. I've been writing for a living for 35 years.
Thank
That's
you. So the panel today is on rewriting versus editing. And I think most people are familiar with the terms, but just to make sure everybody is on the same page, I wanted to ask you first, what do you see as the distinction between rewriting versus, say, extensive editing?
I'll go. Writing is a creative process. Editing is a critical process. They're very different things in my mind. When I'm trying to create an idea or a narrative or a story or relationships, my brain is in one place. When I'm trying to check for tone, check for pace, check for other things, from a technical standpoint, my brain needs to be in a different place. So don't edit and rewrite simultaneously, in my opinion.
I agree 100%. At Wordsmith Writing Coaches, we use slightly different terminology. We use something called the PDREP process, PDREP. P is pre-writing, D is drafting, and we really make that a completely separate step. And R is revision, and E is editing. And those are also separate things for exactly the reasons that Scott just said. But we like to think of it as, the drafting is when you create the whole thing all at once, right? Like imagine like a block of marble. And the revision or rewriting process, you are adding to that, or you're taking parts of it and moving, maybe marble is the wrong thing, a big block of clay, right? And so you're cutting a bit of clay out from over here and splitting it over here. You're adding to it. You're not carving away from it yet. And then once all the pieces are present, because there might have been some missing ones when you first drafted it. Now, once you've got all the pieces in place and you've got them all arranged properly, then you can start editing, which is where you start carving away at it and revealing the more perfect structure.
I think Stephen King was the one who said you should write with the door closed and edit with the door open. And so I think when you're rewriting versus editing, I think rewriting is the door is still a little bit closed. That's not open for public consumption at that point. It's when you start the editing process, that's when you open the door and you think, okay, somebody's going to look at this. How do I want it to look for them? Writing is super personal. And the editing part is when you're taking that personal experience and making it available for a broad audience.
That's a great quote. I'm going to use that.
So the reason why I introduced myself as a discovery writer is because I think the process and the definitions are going to be different for depending on the type of writer you are. So for me, editing versus rewrites. Editing, I am taking whatever I wrote in, whether it's Word or Scrivener, whatever, and I am moving pieces around in there, rewriting some sentences, whatever, fixing plot holes. When I rewrite, I start a brand new project. I start a brand new Word document, and I know that horrifies plotters. I have plotter friends, and they just stare at me and wonder, you're going to rewrite that entire novel? How do you do that? And I said, well, that's just part of my process. The first draft was just to figure out the story. And so when I rewrite, it's a new document. It's a new day.
Yeah, I don't know if I have much to add. I think Ray Bradbury said the Stephen King quote, but we're grosser. He said, like, throw up every morning and clean up every afternoon. I was like, why would you choose that? But dude,
it's memorable.
I think it just gets down. We've gone from high art of like sculpture to, anyways, now we're throwing it.
I love it.
But I do think that what everyone said, that distinction of sort of the critical brain versus the creative brain is the big difference. And what was I going to say? Yeah, and I think of rewriting is as whether you're literally rewriting it or whether you're going in and moving your cursor around the document. Either way, I think if you're erring towards that creative side, that's rewriting, and if you're more critical in your thinking and approach to it, that's editing.
And getting back,
okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Getting back to something Cindy said that I think is really fascinating, is your individual creative method makes a difference. People like me who learn to write to a deadline, and so when I'm in that mode, it is an entirely different kind of writing. And if you're a discovery writer, or what they refer to as a pantser, a seat of the pants writer, you're gonna think differently. I mean, radically. The major beats, the major changes, the major arcs, and so all these answers that we're going to offer today are, this is what works for me. Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I think that's an important caveat between the creative writing aspect and the more critical editing aspect. So my question is, how do you know when you're done with the creative writing part and ready to edit? And what does your editing process look like? And we're kind of, Nic mentioned the difference between revision and editing. And for the purpose of this, we're kind of lumping revision and editing into one. And what does your editing process look like?
Pick someone.
I think for me, sort of, what's a good? Can't come up with an analogy, but sort of flip flop back and forth between the two. So you write a draft, and you go into critical mode, and you edit it. Whether you're making marks or whatever, and then you probably see, or maybe you rewrite it. Either way, whatever your process is, it's sort of they trade off. So you get it to this level with a first draft, and then you edit it. Then you do another rewrite, and then you edit that, and then you do however many it takes until there is the famous have to say I don't think my time fiddling with this is giving me enough of a result in the final, and that's when you're done. But I think to me is sort of that going back and forth and between the two modes with each subsequent draft, however you define that. I don't know if that answers how it ends. I guess it ends when you're just like, I'm done.
It was more like, how do you know when to shift from writing into editing? But we will come back to that in a minute.
Well, I think to me, it's I do it by drafts. I do a draft and then I go back and I do a draft and I go back. So that answers that more.
I do it by scenes, by chunks. I do it in much smaller chunks. But every author is going to have a different writing style. I go one scene at a time. I can't do like an entire draft and then go back and do a pass of that whole draft. I mean, I recommend that to my clients, but I personally, it's not possible for me personally. So I have to go scene by scene. But every writer is going to be different. And guys, look, if you need to know yourself. And all the things that we're saying are things that either work for us or work for our clients or observations that we've made. And you need to try on all this stuff and see what fits for you, especially if you are not neurotypical, which I am not. I have certain interesting issues that I need to deal with, and those profoundly affect my writing process and my editing process.
For me, I know when I'm drafting versus when I'm ready to edit. So if I get to a place where it's like, okay, I'm no longer in a creative process because I feel like there's something missing here or whatever. And there's been times where I've done what Cindy's done and I've scrapped an entire manuscript and started over from scratch. I don't actually scrap it though, and I don't recommend actually scrapping it. I save it in what I call a cuts file. So it'll be like, I call it whatever the title of the book is, my working title, cuts. So that if for some reason I regret that profoundly later on, I can go back and mine through that and figure out when I need to pull back in, because I've made the mistake once of deleting full on and not being able to find it again. And that's tragic. That'll make you cry a little bit. So don't do that. But when you're done, for me, it's like when I reach the end and then I read through it again and it feels emotionally accurate, which that's such a weird, I don't even know how to really phrase that, but when I'm crying in the right places.
That's a good way to phrase it.
In the right places, when I am emotionally invested, when I'm not bored, and when I can read through my first draft and I'm entertained, I'm like, okay, this is now ready for editing. I have now sufficiently edited or created something that is entertaining to me and fun for me and sad for me and scary for me, or whatever the emotion that I'm going for. If I've done my job for myself, then I know that it's possible I can do that for a reader as well. And it's time to move into editing.
So speaking only for...
Oh, sorry. So to add to what Julie said, yes, I don't trash my discovery drafts. I save it somewhere else. I just put them out of the way so I don't look at them. That's but when I finish a story, whether it's a short story or a long form manuscript, a novel, I set it aside for a little bit, because unless I'm on deadline, Scott's got a really good point about deadline. And then I like to read on print, because Scott started writing on deadline, believe it or not, in journalism. And we often proved better on print. So we printed everything out. And yes, we did have paste up, but anyway. And I'll sit down and I'll read my story and I will ask myself, as Julie mentioned, do I like the story? Am I entertained? Do I have resonance with the story? And if there's plot holes, great. I'll make a note, but I'll move on. I'll keep reading it like I am a reader. And if I don't like what I'm reading, yeah, there's a problem there that I need to fix, and I'll figure out how to redraft it. But if I like what I'm reading, and then there's just little itty bitty problems here and there, then that's a decision to edit it later on. But that's how I know when the story's ready for editing is as I'm reading it. Do I like it? Because I'm writing for me, not necessarily for all y'all out there.
You are your own first audience, right? And if you don't entertain yourself, I'll guarantee you're not going to entertain anyone else. But so kind of extending that same idea, write until you're done writing. If that means that you finish the scene, then do that. If that means that you finish the chapter, then do that. If that means you finish the book, then do that. And that may occur over multiple writing sessions. But you will know some place in your mind, you will say, okay, I'm done telling the story. My recommendation would be walk away from it. That can be a 5-minute break to go get a drink. That can be an overnight rest. That can be walking away for a week and coming back to reread. But when you come back now, you're a reader and you're reading for entertainment. And that's where you can start to mark up, and not before. Write until you're finished, then read.
Agree 100%. And write until you're finished is going to be a subjective thing. Trust yourself.
I want to just real quickly say reiterate what Nic said, which is like with any writing advice in this panel or any of them, is you got to do what's right for you, which we've all said. But also, like what he said, I think so important is try different things. You may think something works great, but maybe something else will work better, and give it a shot. And I think too often people resist whatever you think sounds more onerous. You're going to tell yourself that you're not that kind of a writer, but it's often just laziness. And so many times this is not to Cindy, there are certainly pantsers and discovery writers, but so many people I think want to be that because they think it's easier. It's not easier, but they think it's easier because they don't have to make an outline. Try making an outline. But if you're someone that's like, I could never not have an outline, try not having an outline. If you're someone who goes by scene or the whole book, try different things. And maybe even, I think obviously eventually people hit a rhythm, but even it may be a different project requires a different approach too. And if you've never tried any different approach, you're going to be, lost. So I just wanted to reiterate that point of try things.
No, that is a really important point. And I think that's sort of what we're trying to angle at here when we're talking about our different personal experiences, is that we've all tried and failed at multiple things. Nic and Julie know this from a previous panel we were on, but I have outlined, I have tried so many different methods. Save the cat, 7-point plot, what index cards. I've done it all. I have failed at it all. I once wrote a 12,000 word outline for a novel. I got 2 chapters in and I deviated off the outline and I started doing something else because my creative process just doesn't work around outlines. And yeah, I gave it an honest try. It just won't, is not my process, right? And so, but I have plotter friends and they cannot imagine writing a single word of a short story even without an outline. And it's just a different way of approaching storytelling. And if you don't try, then you won't figure out what processes work for you, and you will keep bashing your head against that wall. So yeah, try, fail, just like your characters do. And once you figure out who you are, then stay true to that.
Well, and your process may honestly change from moment to moment.
Yes.
To Cindy's point, right? You may start out with a plot outline, and as you're writing, your creative brain is firing and you're seeing new possibilities because you're discovering as you go. Don't be afraid to deviate. Trust yourself as a storyteller. But it's also to your advantage to have some sort of structure. So I do both, right? And it can be from project to project or even from scene to scene. I will change my method depending on what I think I need to accomplish in this next section of the story. So, be willing to mix and match as well as pick a school. So,
Oh yeah, for sure. Being whether you're a pantser or a plotter, is not a binary identifier for sure.
right.
Exactly. I want to drill down into this process a little bit more. Several of you have mentioned a little bit about what you do, that when you finish a draft, that you read through as a reader and mark things. But I think one of the hardest things, especially for aspiring writers, they know how to write. They very seldom know how to revise. And so could you talk in a little bit more detail about your process? What do you do once you've done that initial read through? What's your next step? How do you decide what things to tackle? As if you were giving advice to someone who's like, I want to revise this, but I don't know how. So what does your process look like?
For me, when I'm done and I'm moving into revision and I want it to be ready, I know what my editor is looking for, because I've had enough of her and I've worked together enough on enough projects that I know what things she's going to tag me on and say, seriously, after this many years, you haven't figured this part out yet. So I go through those things first and I go and look for them. Those pet words that I have, like I use little lot. I use it all the time. Just was a little set. This is a dumb sentence, but you know what I mean? A little this, a little that. They were a little whatever. There's little, and I go through and I just do a search for that word and I get rid of them, unless I really, really like where it is at that particular point. And then I go through voices and just make sure the voices are accurate. It's like, hey, does this person sound like that person? Are they too similar? Is it okay that they're similar because they're best friends and they're in the same environment or whatever, and so that they might have a little bit of the same vernacular? I go through those things and I make those choices. So I just find a few things and I pick it, and then I kind of go through for that. A lot of it is just searching, doing a little find it, Control F, and then go through it and say, okay, what does this look like? And what is my editor going to ding me on and say, Julie, seriously, get your stuff together. What the heck? I've been doing this for years with you. So that's kind of how I get started.
Mine is seems to. I have people seem to see things, and I realize no seem, is only do.
I heard Beth Meacham talk about this at World Fantasy Con one year, and it just sort of was mind blowing to me. And when she is editing a manuscript, she can see story arcs like threads, sort of like in a weave, and then she can see which threads to pull to sort of pull the whole weave together and make it a cohesive whole. And the way she described it was kind of like synesthesia, when people can see colors or smell colors, that sort of thing. And a huge light bulb went off in my head, because I've seen stories as shapes for so long. And it didn't even occur to me that nobody else sees it that way, or at least not everyone sees it that way. So when I'm done writing a story, I can kind of see the shape as I'm reading. This is why I go back and read it as a reader. I can see the shape of the story as it's playing out. And if it doesn't look quite right to me, then I will start with revising the shape of the story so that it's more, not uniform exactly, but that it's the right shape. I know this sounds so woo-woo. And then once it's in the right shape, then I go in and I start drilling in for details. So like sensory details and making sure that I'm not info dumping in one place or another. And making sure that the voices for my characters are distinct. And, then, like, as Julie said, to drill down into the details before I hand it off to the next phase. But that's how I go about editing.
Now we know Cindy's superpower, which is awesome.
That's right.
You know what? You're the first person I've ever met who sees information as a shape. I've described it that way for years.
Yeah.
As a structured writer for technical writing, there is a shape of information and there is a relational diagram. There's a system, a structure.
Yeah.
That I just kind of, it's so second nature now, but that is fascinating. I love that.
I used to teach rhetoric, and this is exactly it. The first canon. Well, the second canon of rhetoric is arrangement, and so from the very beginning of how I think about ideas and everything, because I'm one of those weird people. I learned Latin, I learned rhetoric, and so invention is the first canon, and arrangement is the second canon. So in invention, you're creating the things, and I imagine them as shapes, trying to fit them together, and that's the arrangement part. Is you fit them all together, and you realize, oh, drat, there's a piece missing here. Scoot these apart, put the missing piece in. So yeah, I see it very visually. I have to force myself to zoom in and look at the details later. I'm exactly like you, Cindy, in that sense.
Yay! Oh my gosh.
We got like
that's awesome.
everyone together on one page. We found you three.
I know.
I found my people.
Seriously, I know. I get so many blank looks from people like, you are so weird.
Have you seen that? I mean, Vonnegut, there's a Vonnegut lecture kind of, I mean, maybe you see them differently, I don't know, but he kind of plots like stories as shapes, I can't remember, one of them was pretty funny. He's like, it starts out, he's like, we're starting out here at, I won't cuss, but OS, I'm dead, whatever. Anyways, but
Yeah.
I think there was a meme I saw about like sending it, an email, and it's about proofreading, but you proofread it 100 times and then you hit send, and 2 seconds later you notice all your typos, right? Or whatever. And I think that's kind of true of editing. If you can either literally send it to somebody, if you have a beta reader or whatever, or a group, or if you can somehow trick yourself, then that someone else is reading it, it's amazing. Like, again, not even to get the response from people, but just after you send it to them, or if you can think about, I'm going to send this to Nick or whoever, and you start seeing it through another person. It's like you're playing the guitar in front of an audience now, not in your room. And if you can, however you can do it to literally have that happen, or trick yourself, this is where the reading it out loud thing I think comes in, is you're experiencing it not in your own head. And if whatever you can do to do that, I think is incredibly helpful.
So riffing off of what you're saying, David, one of the things that I think is really important is making that clear separation between interpreting and producing. So what I will do, since I'm kind of a inspiration writer, I actually generally balance 2 or 3 projects until one of them just completely takes over my brain and I have to finish it now. But I will intentionally move on to a different project, get my mind in a different place, and then come back to a previous draft, so that I can't be a new person, but I can be looking through a slightly different viewpoint than I was when I wrote it. And I can make that choice explicitly. And you can do that with mechanical tools as well, right? A lot of people write online, print it out, read it before you go to bed, as if you were a reader, right? Change your interaction with it a little bit so that you can kind of mentally reset and go in that different mindset.
It is amazing that either printing it out, or I've like sent it to my Kindle and reading it in a format that you're used to reading finished books. Obviously you probably can't bind it, but I did have a teacher who talked about he would do like the, print it out on 2 pieces of paper this way. So it was more like reading a book. To get out of your head, to read it as a reader, as an editor.
I'm going to mention one trick really quick because nobody has mentioned this, but something that I do, something I encourage students to do with all kinds of writing, is a reverse outline.
Exactly.
Where you go through what you have and you outline scene by scene, right? Who the characters are, what the goal is for the scene, what the purpose is in the overall narrative. And that also tricks me into looking at it more critically.
We call that a working synopsis. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, because it is the most dangerous thing that you can do as a rewriter is to know what you intended and to ignore the fact that you didn't actually put it in there. So whatever it takes to get your mind in a different place so that you can read yourself as though fresh, do that.
Yeah, what Rosalyn mentioned, I called a analysis outline. So it's sort of like doing a postmortem.
Mhm.
And I have definitely done that as well. Tried that.
Well, it might not be dead. It might just be.
Oh,
It just might be ill.
I've had DOAs. It happens.
Okay.
So that is a perfect segue into our next question, which is, how do you know when editing isn't enough, when you have to actually revise? For instance, my next book that's coming out, I sent it to my editor and she said, I like the character, but let's get rid of the villain and the inciting incident and see what happens.
Oh my
Oh my gosh! What?
Yeah, for a rewrite. So how do you know when
Then you have like that's
problem
a
in the
slice of life.
how do you know when the problem in the manuscript is too big to fix with editing, with your usual editing skills, that you need to go back to the drawing board and start over?
I just finished a YA book. It deals with a lot of very heavy topics, and it's something that's been percolating in my head for like 5 years. But I started it, and I'm like, something's wrong. So I sent the first 50 pages to my agent, and then I ended up in the hospital and had a whole situation. But I got her feedback while I was in the hospital, and it wasn't great feedback. So then I just abandoned it. I'm like, fine. I'm just clearly not meant to write this very, very deep and meaningful book that I really wanted to write. I'm just meant to write the fluffy stuff. Fine. I'm good with that. But then I keep thinking about it. So then I went back and I redid it again, got 50 pages into it. I'm like, something's wrong. And I could you just feel it where you're like, something's wrong and I need to fix this. And so I sent it to a few people who I trust with my whole soul to be super mean and honest to me, but in a way that makes me still like them. So, and those people are valuable. If you have those people in your life, the people who will be mean to you and give you all the information that you need, but that you'll still be with friends with at the end of the day, those people are the most valuable people you will have as a writer in your life. I sent them and they're like, okay, this is where you're going wrong. And then I was able to take it and now it's done. And it's like, oh, that's exactly what I wanted it to be. And now it's exciting because it's like, okay, this is what I meant for this to be. And so when you're going from revising, me, I almost innately feel it. It's something that I'm going through it and it's like, I need to revise because this isn't right. Back to the character, my agent basically said, I love this. It was almost like she was saying, I love the idea, but I really wish somebody else had written it. That's what it felt like. It was horrible. It was a horrible email to get while I'm sitting in the hospital dying. It was like,
Oh,
okay, that was great. But it's like my one thing, but you just can sense that something's off, and just be honest with yourself. Am I feeling okay about it? And you're gonna know, you. That I think it was Scott who said, "Know thyself" or whatever.
Yes, know thyself.
One of the to your point, Julie, if you can find a good external reader who you can trust to not just like you and tell you what a great writer you are, who will give you that honest feedback, that is absolute gold. Keep that person as close as you possibly can, because that is one of the most critical things. And I think you're absolutely right. We usually, not always, sometimes we delude ourselves into believing we've written perfect gold, and it's just not there. So whether you do it by process, right, always have a writing group or a second reader, a beta reader, or whether you do it just to troubleshoot, if you can get somebody who can read you clean and give you honest feedback, that is so powerful for moving beyond your first layer into that deeper second layer.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I have a group of a trio of readers, and we trust each other enough, and they're all writers too. We've all been published. We trust each other enough with our first drafts. Like, that's how much we trust each other. And sometimes I write a story and I think, oh, it's rough, but it's a good story. It's a solid story. It's got good bones. I'm going to turn it over to my group and see what they think. And they come back with, all sorts of confusing feedback, like we don't get the story, or we're not sure what you're doing here, and all that sort of feedback helps me figure out, okay, what I intended to write, the themes, the emotional impact I wanted people to walk away with, that sort of thing, didn't make it on the page. So now I got to figure out, okay, can I revise it, or do I have to rewrite it? So oftentimes, I'll get mixed feedback. One person likes it, the other two are like, not sure what's going on here. And then I have to make the decision if I missed it with the other two writers, is it because of what didn't make it on the page, or is it because they weren't the right reader for that story, right? Because we're not always each other's readers in terms of, we're the right audience. And then every so often, I get unanimous agreement. It's a great story. And then it's like, yay! But, I still go back and revise a little bit. But then I know, okay, I'm on the right track. I'm not redrafting this one. So yeah, first readers are absolutely critical that you can trust.
Well, and one of the biggest, frankly, if you get two people who read it and give you absolutely opposed ideas as to what was wrong, what that means is you missed. And you need to consider rewriting the scene because you just plain missed. And it's just not working. So yeah, if you can get that, that's gold.
Yeah. When two people know that there's a problem, but they don't even agree on what the problem is,
right?
Then that's sort of like a meta problem. It doesn't mean that they cancel each other out and you can just leave it because those guys just don't get it. It's to make them get it.
It means you've got your work cut out for you as the writer to figure out, all right, where do I go off track on this?
Right.
Well, and as often as not, it's a problem back in your manuscript. You didn't set this up correctly. So learning to figure out when it's this scene that's suboptimal, or you just didn't set it up right, is another. I wish I could give you a clean answer as to how to fix that problem. But if you can at least recognize it, that now gives you a chance to focus your problem-solving effort a little bit.
David, you haven't waited.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, the only thing I would really add is that I guess every project's different, but where you're going to be most likely to have to win in the process, it may depend on where on the pants to answer to plotter spectrum you fall. Like my friend Christopher Rocchio he's very much an outliner, like a weird degree. I'm like, how do you know you're 18% through the book? But writing it, the first draft. But his term is he said, I pants the outline, is the way he puts it. And so when he's writing a novel, he does not really do what we're talking about, big revision after the first, at all, really, because all that revision took place in the outline. He spitballed and revised and changed, and then, because the outline is so detailed, by the time he's first drafting, there's nothing, he doesn't really change any major. It's more a matter of maybe rewriting in the sense of, okay, I need to flesh this scene out more, but it's not revising in a big, okay, I'm going to remove this character from the book. So depending on how you write, and you're going to be making these decisions is different. So
if you've got a 30,000 word outline, you've basically written the book, and you're just changing it from outline into prose at that point.
Well, it's one of those interesting things. A good friend of mine who's a very popular writer generally outlines, then he goes through and adds the dialogue, then he goes through and adds the sensory detail. And he's taken his outline and just by adding words to it, turned it into the manuscript. And because it retains its previously well thought out structure, he can be at least assured that it's a well-formed tale, even if there may yet be some further editing to do. But, if that's what works for you, then layer it on, right? Julie was talking earlier about going through and adding description. Okay.
I don't understand. I know that people write like that, but personally, I just
in a way.
I get it. It sounds wonderful. It
seems like the
tried
easiest,
it myself, but
and yet it's like the hardest. Right? Like it seems like the most obvious way to do it, right? Like you building it up, but
Right.
I've tried, and I don't see how you could do that. But yeah.
I can't do the sedimentary system where you just kind of add more layers until you're ossified, but okay, whatever works for you, man.
Yeah,
I
I do plot and outline. I do a lot of pre-writing, so I do that, but I can't. Yeah. Anyway, carry on.
I just have one more question before we open it up to the audience for questions, which is, what do you do when you get stuck? When you're editing or you're rewriting and you hit a point where you're just stuck, what do you do?
Something physical. I go make a sandwich or I go for a run.
I clean. I can't tell you, cleaning is such mundane work. Mowing a lawn is mundane work. Organizing a closet. And when my brain is bored, it needs to entertain itself. And so it works out the problem for me. And being stuck is something I don't really have a lot of luxury to do because I'm usually on a deadline that is intense enough that I'm not allowed to be stuck for too long. So whatever is gumming up the process, I need to resolve it relatively quickly. So when I'm having problems with a book, when my house is super tidy, it's like, oh, look how nice it looks. It doesn't normally look like that. That's fantastic.
I love that. Someone walks into your house. Oh, I'm sorry, Julie.
Exactly. I was just thinking that.
I like it.
Okay.
I like absorbing story in a different format. So if I'm writing a science fiction story or if I'm writing a fantasy story, I'll go watch something that's not either of those things. And it just sort of jogs the subconscious of, okay, you've been studying story for a really long time. You know how to do this. And it just kind of psychs me back into the mood. And then I can sit down and say, okay, it just absorbed a really good story. Now let's figure out what's wrong with this one.
So just two quick thoughts, and then we can get to questions. Nic talked about, going and exercising or doing something that's just entirely different from the writing, the physicality of writing. I tend to flip to a different project so that my brain engages that separately and allows my subconscious to figure out what it's doing without me sitting there pounding on the door and making it afraid. And for me, that works a lot, right? I will go to bed at night knowing that I've just written, 8,500 words of the worst dreck in the history of the universe, and wake up in the morning having dreamed and gone to subconscious land, knowing precisely how to fix the problem. I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. But another thing that's really interesting, an excellent writing instructor that I had, Aldous Budrus, talked about that when you run into that block, your idea hopper is empty. Go out and input. Do something sufficiently different that you get inputs that just reset the way you're looking at the world, and that will help break most blocks.
What about you?
David, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, let's go to questions. I don't want to take up. I want to let people other.
All right. Do we have questions?
We have lots of questions.
Oh, yeah.
Emma asks, as a pantster, how do you figure out what needs rewrites and get yourself back into the story after you've moved on?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I could read that in several different ways.
Yeah, I just kind of, like I said earlier, I'll walk away from it or do some other project, then try to come back and reread it fresh. And that usually helps me see where I've been thin here or over talky there. And that's how I do the reset.
And sometimes it's not a question of, sometimes you need to take a step back and think about, like question what part of the process you don't assume that you just need to edit this differently. And I don't know how to edit it. Sometimes taking a fresh start at it, a completely separate start at it will be helpful. Like I'm actually working on something right now, and one of the scenes is so difficult, I've written it 4 different ways. And I do not mean 4 drafts of the same scene. I mean 4 different scenes that go in different directions and end in different ways. And I'm not sure which of those I'm going to use, but I'm not stuck anymore. I hope that's helpful. It's weird that we can't hear the audience talking to us when we have these questions. Should we go to a different question, or do other people want to jump in on this one?
Okay. Jay Gosling asks, do you ever go back to rewriting after editing? What was that like?
Sure, all the time. Why not?
Yeah, there was a time where I had a book. I turned it into my editor. I was super proud of it. It's just great. And she called me up and said, "Hey, let's go do lunch." And I love when we go do lunch because that usually means that we're coming up with new ideas and we're working on the next project. So I thought that means that that's going over here and then I can start something new, and that's always exciting. That wasn't what we were doing. What she had was my manuscript just riddled with red, and she's like, "Here's what's wrong. And here's what we need to fix." But she's like, "Don't worry. We are going to sit here and we're going to eat great food." And I had my project manager and I had my editor and there was me. She's like, "We're going to eat great food and we're going to talk about it and we're going to brainstorm how to fix these problems that we have." It was a full rewrite. I mean, I thought I was done. The book was done. And then it wasn't as done as I thought it was done. It was more like raw. And that was just unfortunate. And it was a whole rewrite. I rewrote the whole book. And you know what? They were right on every point. Everything that I thought was really fantastic, I was very much deluded in myself. And they made excellent points. And that book turned out to be amazing. It won a bunch of awards. It got the starred review. It worked out really well that it was rewritten. But I'll tell you what, it was a dodgy rewrite process. But sometimes you think you're done and you're just not.
I think one of the reasons that people ask this question is because they hear people like me say, and people like Scott, and people like, I think everybody so far has said something like this, that you don't edit when you're trying to write or revise, and you shouldn't, at least when you're working with a professional editor. You want to get all the revisions out of the way as much as possible first before you start doing line editing and copy editing, because why actually pay money to get this whole chapter copy edited when you're going to rewrite it and then it needs to be copy edited again? It's just not efficient. It's costly. So there is that. Like, if you look at it from 10,000-foot level, yes, you don't want to edit. You want to finish all the revisions and then that's done, and then you go on to the editing process and you just edit everything and then you're done. But when you're actually digging through your work, yeah, I'll edit while I'm creating or writing, but I'll edit just enough to serve that writing process, the creative process. In other words, like, I'll go through a sentence and figure out the word choice, which is kind of an editing sort of thing, but I'm not doing that in a destructive way. It's that I'm trying to create this sentence that says what I want it to say. So, and then during editing, yeah, I'll do some revising and rewriting, but just enough to serve the editing process. I don't want to short circuit either of those separate things. Is that helpful? I don't know. I can't hear the audience talking. This is very strange.
I think that we are at time. Can everybody go through and just really quickly tell people where they can find you?
Yes,
Go ahead, Cindy.
I have a final panel at 3:00 on strong women protagonists, but I'll be around all afternoon.
I think I'm done here, guys. I think this is my last panel. So
I have a panel at 4. Forgiveness is Divine at the J.R. Tolkien room, and my books can be found anywhere books are sold.
David, is there a way that you want people to contact you if they want to contact you?
Oh, me? Yeah, you can go to my website. It's www.myname.com. And there's a little contact form, and I'll get. That's probably. Or I'm on Facebook, but I'm not on there much. So if I'm a month later getting back to you, that's the reason why.
And since I publish mostly short fiction and anthologies and whatnot, the easiest way to find my stuff is on Amazon. And individually, I'm available. I also do a podcast called Stories for Nerds, so you can hit me by any number of venues.
Nic, what about you?
www.wordsmithwritingcoaches.com. I've got a form there. You can email me at nick@wordsmithwritingcoaches.com, but it's spelled funny. It's just NIC. There's no K on Nick. There you go. And you can message me on Discord too. I'm on Discord a lot.
Thank you all for sharing your expertise. It's been a fun panel.